Shalom Chavrim, I'm Steve Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live, and I've got a couple of things, several things actually, I want to share with you. And one of the things that I wanted to speak to you about this evening, so let me just kind of give you a cap over of all the things we're going to be looking at. Going to be looking at David Sling, Israel's defense system there, and why has it not been in use for quite some time now, for actually over a year. It kind of disappeared off of the radar there. In fact, I have the Jerusalem Post article up and behind me, and that's an old article back in January of 2019. But there might be some interesting things that you may not be aware of going back all the way back to July of 2018. Going to share some of that information with you there. And I want to kind of do a little bit of an update about the al-Baghdadi killing, why the United States actually killed him, and of course maybe even answer some of the skeptics' ideas that, oh, we don't actually support ISIS anyway, Steve. You were wrong on that information. Well, that's not the case. No, we were not wrong. Why they do all these things is, of course, always of an interest. And then I've got some information I want to share with you from a book called The New Jerusalem by Michael Collins Piper there. It's actually on page 97, and it kind of goes in line with some of the things I've shared with you in the article or the broadcast we did that really brought a lot of haters out that support President Trump. And I'm sure as the people are watching this impeachment process, I guess, just looking for more fuel for the fire. I don't know. Anyway, let's get right into this. I got some very good friends there that always have some very good intel, and that's why I also have to say that where they claim that we were wrong about ISIS, that's completely a farce. But, one thing that my intel shared with me about that, which I'm going to get into in a little bit here, is to better explain when we say that the U.S. is helping ISIS militants, what do we mean by that? Do the U.S. soldiers actually, are they aware of it? No, that's normally not the case. So we'll get into that in just a little bit here. Back on the 23rd of July in 2018, the Syrian army shot 2 missiles targeting the positions of al-Nusra front in its operations to free Dara. Remember, that's a big battle that was raging right there on the border with Israel. And other areas, some of which were in close proximity to the Golan Heights. The missiles were from a type of the Tashrin, which is a copy of the Iranian Fatah 110, and the Syrian army builds under a license agreement that they have with the Iranian military. Israel tried to intercept them using the David Sling there, and besides protecting the terrorists, they wanted to test the new system of the air defense, David Sling, to see if its design could actually take out those missiles. Now, of course, Israel has a system within the David Sling that if it misses its target, it will pretty much self-destruct. It's got a little explosive inside, it'll blow up, and if it doesn't hit its target. Well, they didn't hit the target. That was the big problem for Israel. It was really a major letdown for the Israelis when David Sling did not intercept these missiles that are a copycat of an Iranian type of missile, and of course protecting al-Nusra at the same time. So anyway, as that happened, one of the things that took place there is that missile fell inside of Syria, and the Syrians were able to get a hold of it, and later reports were that the Russians actually had that missile. But one of our latest intel sources that we have on that is that the Iranians actually got a hold of the David Sling missile. Now, of course, the Syrian government did not have the ability to do anything with it, and of course, whether or not the Russians had it, or did the Russians give it to the Iranians, or did the Iranians get it from the Syrians and Russia claimed to have it but never did have it? That's all kind of an interesting thing. No one really knows. But the fact that the Iranians have it gives the Iranians an extra boost of knowing how David Sling is actually designed, how it's made to intercept Iranian missiles that would be coming in, and is only giving the Iranians a much more of an edge to counter Israeli defense systems in the future. If you recall, a little while back I shared with you, and this came right from the Pentagon. One of my own sources inside the Pentagon that works very closely with President Trump give me permission to share a story that they wanted to go to the public, that the Iranians had technology that the United States could not mitigate. And they believed that that technology had come from the Chinese, given to the Iranians, and this was considered a great threat to the United States and a great concern for the national security of the United States. That was shared with me right here out of the U.S., and I was really encouraged by the Pentagon source to make that information public, and it's one of the reasons why the U.S. was so concerned about Iran. But, you know, it all keeps moving right along regardless, right? Anyway, so let's move on. And listen, too, let me just also thank real quick as we get going here, thank my moderators for being so kind to be here and to make sure that we keep our YouTube live program a place that is acceptable to their guidelines, which, by the way, I had no clue that my wife just told me about it. I guess some of you guys have written us about this. Where are we going to be when YouTube shuts down our channel? We hear that there's a major purge coming in December the 10th, I believe it is. And so we will have to see how that goes. I can tell you right now, just so you're aware, keep this in mind. We do have alternative channels. If you look at under my actual name, Stephen Ben-Nun, B-E-N with a hyphen, N-U-N. I don't know if there's a hyphen in it, but if you look up us on Vimeo, this is the platform we actually load the videos that go on Patreon. Now, they're not available to the public. Some of them are, but some of them are not. You might want to get just over there as well, because if we get knocked off of YouTube, we're going to be looking at the backup channels. We have Patreon, of course. We also are on BitChute. So keep that in mind. And also, we started the other news channel called Fact News Network. Now, I've been told, from what my wife briefed me on earlier today, is that people that preach the gospel are going to be the people that they target. I told my wife, I said, you know what's weird? I had no idea about this, and yet at the same time, I get this revelation while I'm speaking with you guys, this biblical message the other day, and I got a deeper revelation on it even since then. I need to put one up on the Noon Institute about this. But when Jesus quotes to us, walk in the light while you have light, for when the darkness comes, you won't be able to walk. Also, it speaks about, I forget if it's Jesus that says this or if it's Paul. We must work while it is day, for the night cometh when no man can work. And the Lord revealed to me that when you're dealing with the darkness there, that's the Pharisaic rule. When the Pharisees get complete rule, remember, the Qumranite community considered the Pharisee doctrine, which is a Talmudic doctrine, as you can see it here on the back here, all this Jewish Talmudic doctrine here. Once they get full control, they will shut down the gospel of Jesus Christ unless it lines up with the Noahide laws. So this is what I'm hearing. I had no idea of that. But I just said it, and I hadn't gone. I'm actually doing a study on that, and so we're trying to put that together. Listen, we are also, by the way, we are looking at starting a local church here in this area here. And listen, I don't see comments very well, because with me trying to run this, I do see somebody asking about being a moderator. Whether it's a brother, sister, whatever it may be, we would need to do some things to look into that. We will talk about that a different time, okay? So occasionally we do add moderators, but we have to kind of look to see who we're adding, so we make sure we know that somebody that understands the values of what we do here in the ministry. At any rate, let me get back to this here, though. So I wanted to touch the situation with the death of Baghdadi. And because even my good source there that knows a lot about the things that are happening in the Middle East, he wrote me extensively about this, and I was not aware of it, but I'm sure there were people out there that were thinking that, well, you guys were wrong. See, Trump killed Baghdadi, and he really was killed, and so therefore we were never supporting ISIS. Well, maybe it was Obama that supported ISIS, because after all, he left him all the vehicles. And so you have to understand that the demise has given all the apologists for the U.S. foreign policy the opportunity for a lifetime to try to wash their hands for the U.S. from the unholy partnership that they had with the ISIS fighters. And that's very true. This has given them that time to say, we told you so, we never supported ISIS, that's all a lie. And it was a small price to pay to kill off their leader, because they could raise up another leader anytime they want to. But the thing is, what a lot of people are not aware of is that America may claim to be the enemy of ISIS, but everything that we had told you guys to start with, the source that I had that we'd spoke about, that being when the United States and Turkey, which obviously were working hand in hand, Trump pulls out the troops out of northern Turkey, and then the Turkish forces move in. They begin to free the ISIS militants. Everything. We even said it before it happened that this was going to happen. That was the plan. Even the ISIS militants who were being freed obviously knew that they were being freed, and that their purpose was to go into Iraq. But the weird thing is they started getting captured at the border. But everything has a purpose, and everything has a reason for all of that. And but you can't deny the fact, and we know that they knew that they were going there for a purpose, because as they were going there, remember the videos, some of the videos I shared with you here on Israeli News Live, where they were talking about beheading the Kurds on the way to Iraq. Why didn't they regroup then with the ISIS militants that were still in Syria, like in the case of down by Al-Bukamal or still around the Deir ez-Zor region? There's still pockets of ISIS resistance down there, but they never did. They didn't go down there. They didn't join in with them. Instead, they had a purpose and a mission to help destabilize Iraq, so that they could overthrow this government, because it was not going in the direction that the United States wanted it to go into. So anyway, so it's obvious that they received the marching orders. There was no doubt about that. But the Americans, this is what my source writes here, realize how difficult it is to execute a plan like this in a volatile environment of the Middle East, where the parameters, in many cases, even the alliances, steadily shift and change. Nevertheless, they went ahead with the plan. The first, in my opinion, the most important blow was delivered when the government of Iraq removed the man that was supposed to become the Iraqi version of Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, like of Egypt, that is. The problem was not who the guy was, which was General Saadi. They always have a backup, but the problem was the fact that this guy was in control of the forces on the border with Syria. That meant under his supervision, the ISIL fighters crossing into Iraq would not be captured. All right, so if you get what he's saying here, there was something went majorly wrong for the United States. It was a major blow that happened to the U.S. when the Iraqi government removed the man that was supposed to become Iraqi's version of Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. See what it was? They were fearful of General Saadi, because he's growing in popularity there, and that's because the U.S. has made sure he grew in popularity, and as long as he was controlling the forces on the border with Syria, the ISIS militants would have made it to the bases where they were going to go. Now, of course, like my source says here, he said, you got to keep in mind, it's not like when we say that Americans are supporting ISIS militants, like it's, G.I. Joe guy out there, a sergeant whoever might be is going to be there training the ISIS militants on the base. No, I mean, we would know about that already because soldiers would have came out and testified that these type things are going on, but that's not the case. So we know that's not it, right? And it's the same thing when it comes to if we're doing reconnaissance flights for ISIS. Doesn't mean the pilot is aware of what's going on. But anyway, because they removed this guy, the Iraqi government removed him. He was the key man that the U.S. needed to have on the border for their ISIS militants to be able to get inside of Iraq safely to the bases where they were going to protect them at. But that all fell through. And the Iraqis kept very quiet about it. And they were able to slip in. And so at any rate, you know, the U.S. didn't do anything to stop it either. That was the weird thing. So I guess the U.S. figured, okay, if they're going to get captured, it'd only play in the hands of President Trump because he's already under a lot of heat anyway back in the United States. So it'd look good for him if they do get captured because now they can say they killed Baghdadi, and even though they could blame it on the Turks that they escaped, and now they could say, well, our forces are helping the Iraqi forces capture ISIS inside of Iraq. But anyway, that is all just the way things go, and but you know, the information that we were able to give step by step before it happened is clearly very accurate information. And but anyway, one of the things that he had mentioned in here, the source that I have there, I think that's worth mentioning to you guys as well, is that General Soleimani, once in a sort of not so official environment, were saying, in a certain province in Syria, our line consisted of certain number of positions opposing ISIL positions. Oftentimes, we'd take the heavy equipment back from one of these positions for maintenance purposes, and the very weakened station would be attacked. At first, we thought they have a spy, so we rearranged, departmentalized, and to a degree possibly randomized our maintenance and repair schedule to no avail. He said the Americans were attacking ISIL in some areas, but at the same time, they would help them elsewhere, and always claimed their help to be unintentional, coincidental, or by mistake. He said eventually we received the intel from our surveillance that Americans are doing reconnaissance flights for ISIS. So we put more surveillance and got 100% verification. All right? So this is another guy fighting. He's fighting ISIS. And they realize that the Americans are actually helping them. Anytime one of these attacks took place, there was a flight preceding it. After that, we laid a trap twice and then it stopped once they realized we were using their reconnaissance flights as a guide on where the new attacks is going to take place. And that does not mean that the pilot knew, as he says, that his reconnaissance flight was for ISIS, but that does not mean the field commander of ISIS that led the attack knows the info comes from Americans either. So it kind of went both ways. It's always kept in a hush-hush situation. So when President Trump, when he was actually saying that they had taken all the documents after they killed Baghdadi, you have to understand what documents he's talking about. He's talking about the documents that could link America to ISIS. We're talking about documents of banking information, how information goes to and from the areas there, and they knew that with Baghdadi's whereabouts being made more and more known, the Kurds knew. They had planned on, in fact, the second in command of the YPG had stated just the other day that they had planned to take out Baghdadi a month earlier. But when the United States and Turkey did this move, which, by the way, Trump moves the troops out and a month later moves them back in, what's that got to do with getting your troops out of Syria, right? Doesn't that tell you something? Something's going on, right? It's just crazy. Anyway, so, you know, now that we see the Iraqi demonstrations last week have turned out that they expected was the final blow, so they decided to cut their losses, wash their hands by killing Baghdadi, and take all the damning evidence he was having with them. According to the Kurds, Baghdadi has been on radar for over a month. That is why he had been taken before someone else got him. That was one of the latest things that was said about him. So, you know, it's all a game for you guys, right? All a game. Anyway, let me go to this book here real quick. This is really interesting. this book called The New Jerusalem, Zionist Power in America by Michael Collins Piper. And on page 97, it's only 2 pages here, but it kind of corroborates a lot of the information I shared with you guys just recently, but going much further back. He says, the title of this little chapter says, Who Towers Behind Trump? The Strange Story of the Donald. It goes on to say, I'm just going to read you a few paragraphs here, so I think it's worth noting because I didn't even know this information. It says, no, Donald Trump is not Jewish, but an inquiry into the background of his flamboyant American entrepreneur provides some surprising insights into Trump's path to power and influence. For the fact is, Trump's rise to stardom came as a direct consequence of having function as hardly more than a colorful frontman for some very wealthy behind-the-scenes sponsors. The story of the colorful businessman, now television star, called The Donald is on one that demonstrates how non-Jewish individuals and financial interests can rise to the great heights through the sponsorship of Jewish interest. I think it's important to know this, and I'll tell you why. Of course, I don't even know if Trump is president when this book was written. Let me just see real quick if that's the case. Kind of looks like maybe it was written before he became president, but I just don't know the answer to that, guys. Okay, this was actually first published in 2005, so probably not. So anyway, but the thing is it kind of helps you to learn a few things on here. So everyone knows, of course, about Trump's gambling operation and of one of the wide-ranging links of the gambling industry of organized crime, but the story is much bigger than that. His own memoir, right? Trump's own memoir, The Art of the Deal. Trump proudly described how in 1987 he bought his first casino interest when he purchased 93% of the voting stock in the resort's international gambling concern. What Trump doesn't tell his readers is what the late Andrew St. George reported in the Spotlight on October the 30th of 1978 in the previous September 25th of 1978 issue. That Resorts International was established and controlled by frontmen for the Rockefeller and Rothschild families. And their enforcers in the CIA and its allied intelligence agencies, Israel's Mossad. The Spotlight reported focus on the activities of Resorts International and provided readers with an extensive overview of the international and provided readers with an extensive overview of the fixed gambling rackets conducted by the underworld gambling elements. What made the report so explosive was that the newspaper pointed out that the illegal rigged casinos were being operated with the collusion of respectable politicians, law enforcement officials, Wall Street financiers who floated loans to finance the gambling resorts and the high-profile gambling resort operators themselves. In addition, St. George pointed out many of these casino resorts run by the mob through a variety of frontmen have actually been engaged in de facto partnerships with behind-the-scenes mobsters who have assisted the CIA and the Mossad in massive laundering of drug gambling profits that have been channeled into covert operations to allied intelligence agencies. In return, the CIA and the Mossad, using their own influence, have provided protection for illegally fixed gambling operations, preventing law enforcement authorities from cracking down on this corruption. Where does would-be President Donald Trump fit into the picture? To find the answer, we must turn to the murky origins of Resort International. In fact, Resorts evolved from CIA front company set up in the early 1950s by the then CIA director, Alan Dulles, and his associate three-term New York governor, Thomas E. Dewey, and political functionary in the so-called Rockefeller Republican wing of the GOP. The front company in question was innocuously named Mary Carter Paint Company, which did, in fact, operate as a real paint company, paint chain store there. But it was function as a cover for the CIA money laundering operations. And this is what's funny, guys. I mean, not everybody in the CIA is fully aware of those types of operations. It took me being out for years and uncovering the garbage that I was aware of. I mean, of course, I knew they were killing people. Like I said, though, we were always told they were Russian spies. That's why they had to be taken out. Had no idea that actually they were not Russian spies. Instead, they were competition. They were people that would expose the illegal operations of the embezzlement and the money laundering that was going on. And yes, major power companies were involved in it. And they were willing to kill CFOs and everything else to make sure that the information never leaked out. That's the same thing with al-Baghdadi. Al-Baghdadi was actually a Jewish man, and they knew that if he got himself in an awkward position, he'd bust U.S. involvement with the ISIS militants as well. So they had to make sure he died and get a hold of that information so it didn't leak out anywhere else. And by the way, that was another thing, the intelligence source that I have on that is that ISIS is not really supposed to make a major comeback. Their main purpose was to destabilize Iraq. And that's what their purpose was there. Anyway, he goes on to say, among other things, the new cooperation laundered CIA money for arming the anti-Castro Cuban exiles. The company also launched into lucrative casino gambling enterprises in the Caribbean, where the CIA was quite active during the period, having engaged in the Lansky crime syndicate, is now thoroughly documented and widely known plots to topple Fidel Castro, who has enraged the mob by closing down its Cuban gambling enterprises. You know, so you could just go on and on and on and on and read about this stuff here. And this is just a little bit devoted to, you know, why Trump rose to power. He's a front guy. So when people think that Trump is a good guy, you know, well, maybe in one way you might think he is because, you know, he's not really the guy who's behind the scene. He's only the face of the Rothschilds and Rockefellers. But don't kid yourself. Very, very much involved. And I don't know. I know people say, what would you rather have, Steve? Hillary Clinton? No, not at all. But do you really think that Trump's going to put his own cousin in prison? I don't think so. We're just all falling for the lies. I think we really need Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach. Interesting. Oh, by the way, I saw a comment earlier about flat earth, something like that. I got one for you. I was just reading in the Hebrew Matthew the other day, and Yeshua, when he quotes the parable about Jonah in the Hebrew Matthew, he actually says that Jonah was in the bowels of the fish, but he said that the Son of Man would be in the belly of the earth. I read that, and I'm thinking to myself, I'd heard before this thing about hollow earth theory, you know, never really given much thought, but when I read that, and it doesn't say grave, he didn't say he's going to be in the grave, he said he's going to be in the belly of the earth. And of course, we know the scripture says that he, you know, his soul went to hell. We know that he went and preached to those that were in captivity. That's another thing for you to think about. There's a whole bunch of things I have to think about. So anyway, so yeah, whoever thinks that hollow earth is a reality, you may actually be right. I may have a scripture that could prove that. But that kind of blows me away, stuff like that, you know, because I don't get into those things very much, you know. If I see something biblically, I'm interested in the biblical side of things. But to go into all these things, I can't say. And by the way, Jonah was never dead when he was inside the fish either. So you have to think about that, right? We know his body was placed inside of a grave. But when he writes it in the Hebrew language, he specifically says that the son of Adam, actually, guess what he says it there, the Ben Hadam. Let me see if I happen to have that. I don't have it handy. If I had it handed out, I'd read it to you. So I thought I had it sitting here on my desk still. Anyway, I'll read it to you guys some other time there. I'll look into it more to see if there's anything else out there besides that. Blessings to you all. We love you guys. God bless you. Thank you for your support of the ministry here. Visit our website, israelinewslive.org. By the way, our website is always a way to find out what's going on and send us your mailing address. If you support the ministry by mail, or if you support the ministry otherwise and you don't normally go by mail, you go to our website and donate online there. That's fine. We appreciate that. We thank you for that. But if everything collapses down, we need to have a way to be able to contact you, and so that we can continue to get the Word of God to you. And and don't forget Fact News Network. I have not loaded any videos there lately, but it is a backup channel that we started in the event that they take down Israeli News Live. We don't know what all they're going to do. I'll look into that. I didn't know it all till today. So anyway, I want to do a teaching on that anyway about that, where Jesus talks about basically he's telling you. Doesn't say it in these words. It's in a parable. But when the Pharisees get control, they're going to shut down the preaching of the gospel. That's what's coming. What hour are we living in? Think about it. Anyway, by the way, I'm supposed to be on some radio show tonight, and I know I'm supposed to be on one. I forget the name of the radio show, but maybe they've got it out there somewhere publicly. I'm sure they do. If I had it in front of me, I could do it. Well, maybe I can't. Oh, no, I can't tell you because it's on my phone. Anyway, blessings to you all. Shalom. Oh, I know. It's Tribulation Now. That's the show. That's where I'll be at tonight. Tribulation with a hyphen now. I'll be on there live tonight with them at 9 p.m. Be calling in there. I assume that's 9 p.m. Eastern. I think so because they're in Eastern time zone as well. Blessings to you all. Shalom.